I'm Marcus Lawson, 45 years old, and I just walked out of maximum security after serving 20 years for a murder I didn't commit. The first person I called wasn't my lawyer or my mother. It was Rachel, my wife, the woman who promised to wait forever. Her voice was cold when she answered. Marcus, I filed for divorce 8 years ago. I couldn't wait for a maybe. But she didn't know that yesterday the real killer confessed, and the state offered me $10 million in compensation. She also didn't know I'd spent every day in that cell planning exactly what I'd do when I got out. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your life, hit that like button, because this story is about to show you that sometimes freedom is the ultimate revenge. 20 years ago, I was just another 25-year-old software engineer with big dreams and a beautiful fiancée. Rachel and I had been together for 3 years, living in a small apartment in downtown Portland, saving every penny for our wedding and future home. I worked late hours at a startup, coding until my eyes burned, while she finished her nursing degree. We were building something together, brick by brick, line of code by line of code. That night, October 15, 2004, started like any other. I'd stayed late debugging a critical system error that was costing the company thousands in downtime. By the time I left the office, it was past midnight. The parking garage was empty, except for my beat-up Honda Civic and a few other cars belonging to the night security staff. I remember the echo of my footsteps, the flickering fluorescent light above space 3B, the way my keys jangled as I fumbled for them in the darkness. I never made it home. 3 blocks from the office, blue and red lights exploded in my rearview mirror. Within seconds, I was face down on the asphalt, gravel cutting into my cheek, officers screaming commands I couldn't process. Marcus Lawson, you're under arrest for the murder of Gregory Walsh. Gregory Walsh. I'd never heard that name before that moment, but it would define the next 2 decades of my life. The crime scene photos they showed me during interrogation are burned into my memory. A businessman in his 50s, shot twice in the chest, found in an alley just 50 feet from where I'd parked my car that night. Security footage showed my Honda in the area. A witness claimed to have seen someone matching my description running from the scene. My height, my build, my dark jacket, details that could have described 1,000 men in Portland that night. I don't know this man, I told them over and over. I was working. Check with my company, check the login records. But the startup had folded 2 days after my arrest, the servers wiped, my digital alibi erased as if it had never existed. My court-appointed lawyer, overworked and underpaid, barely looked up from his files when he told me to consider a plea deal. 25 to life if you plead guilty, life without parole if you fight and lose. But I didn't do it, he shrugged. That's what they all say. Rachel was there every day during the trial, her nursing scrubs replaced by the only nice dress she owned, a blue sundress I'd bought her for her birthday. She held my eyes when the verdict came down. Guilty of murder in the 1st degree. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. I'll wait for you, she whispered as they led me away in shackles. I'll prove you're innocent. I'll never stop fighting. The ring I'd bought her, 2 months of salary saved, sat in evidence lockup with my wallet and phone. We'd planned to marry that Christmas. Instead, I traded my suit for prison orange and began counting days that would stretch into decades. Maximum security prison isn't what you see in movies. It's worse. The first night, I learned that innocence means nothing when you're surrounded by concrete walls and men who've given up on hope. My cellmate Rodriguez had been inside for 15 years. He took one look at me, soft hands, scared eyes, and laughed. Life without parole, huh? Better get comfortable, college boy. Rachel's first visit came 2 weeks after my processing. Seeing her through that scratched plexiglass partition broke something inside me. She pressed her palm against the barrier, and I matched it with mine, pretending we could feel each other's warmth through the cold surface. I've hired a lawyer, she said, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. A real one this time. We're going to appeal. With what money? I'll figure it out. I'm taking extra shifts at the hospital. I'll sell the car if I have to. Every Wednesday and Sunday she was there. 2 hours of visiting time that became my anchor to the outside world. She brought photos of our old life, us at the coast, her graduation day, the surprise party she'd thrown for my birthday. I kept them in a small box under my bunk, evidence that I'd once been someone else. The letters started immediately. Rachel wrote every single day, sometimes just a few lines about her shift at the hospital, sometimes pages about the lawyer's progress, the new evidence they were searching for, the witnesses they were trying to find. Her handwriting became as familiar as my own reflection in the metal mirror, bolted to our cell wall. Dear Marcus, one letter began. I passed by our old apartment today. The new tenants have painted the door red. You would hate it. I wanted to knock and ask to see our kitchen one more time, but I didn't. That's not our home anymore. You are my home, wherever you are. Prison has its own ecosystem, its own rules. I learned quickly. Keep your head down, find a routine, don't borrow anything from anyone. I started working in the library, cataloging books, and helping other inmates with legal research. It gave me purpose, and more importantly, access to law texts. If I was going to be here, I'd learn everything I could about the system that had swallowed me whole. Other men warned me about what happens to relationships in here. Thompson, doing 20 for armed robbery, told me his wife lasted 3 years. Martinez made it 5 before his girlfriend sent a Dear John letter. Even Rodriguez, tough as nails, went quiet when anyone mentioned his ex-wife. "Your girl seems solid," he said one night, after I'd shown him Rachel's latest photo, her in scrubs, exhausted, but smiling after a 12-hour shift. "But this place has a way of wearing down the outside world. Time moves different in here." "She's different," I insisted. He shrugged. "They all are, until they aren't." But Rachel proved him wrong, visit after visit, letter after letter. When the first appeal failed, she didn't cry. At least not in front of me. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and started outlining Plan B. "We're not giving up," she said. "I don't care if it takes 100 appeals. You're coming home." I believed her. In those early years, I believed her completely. By year 5, I could predict Rachel's visits down to the minute. She'd arrive 10 minutes early, always in the same corner seat of the waiting room, hands folded over whatever book she was reading that week. But something started changing in those 5th-year visits. Subtle things at first. A new hairstyle, designer sunglasses, she quickly tucked away when she saw me noticing. "The hospital gave me a promotion," she explained when I asked about the fresh manicure, the kind she never used to spend money on. "Charge nurse for the cardiac unit. The pay is better." I was happy for her, genuinely. She deserved good things, even if I couldn't give them to her. But the changes kept coming. Her twice-weekly visits became once a week, then every other week. Always with reasonable excuses, extra shifts, mandatory training, her sister needing help with the new baby. "I'm sorry," she'd say, guilt clouding her features. "I hate missing our time together." "It's okay," I'd lie. "I understand." The visitor's room became my study in human relationships. I watched other inmates' families drift away like melting ice, slowly at first, then all at once. The wife who used to bring homemade cookies now sent store-bought. The girlfriend who once drove 3 hours each way started mentioning car trouble. The patterns were as predictable as the prison's daily count. I noticed Rachel had stopped wearing her engagement ring. When I asked, she touched her bare finger unconsciously. "It needs resizing. I've lost weight." But she'd gained weight, actually. Stress weight, she called it, from the long hours and hospital cafeteria food. I didn't point out the contradiction. Then came the visit when she mentioned David. "He's just a friend from work," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Another nurse. He's been helping me understand some of the legal documents for your case." A nurse who understands legal documents. His brother's a paralegal. I wanted to ask why she couldn't just talk to the brother directly, but I already knew the answer. In prison, you develop a sixth sense for lies. They're currency here, traded as easily as commissary items. I recognized the telltale signs, the way she couldn't hold my gaze, how her fingers drummed against the table, the slight catch in her voice when she said his name. Other wives in the visiting room had started avoiding her. I saw their glances, heard their whispers. They knew what I was still denying. Martinez's girlfriend, Carmen, even tried to warn me in her own way. "That's a nice perfume Rachel's wearing," she said once, loud enough for me to hear. "Expensive." Rachel had flushed, mumbled something about a gift from her mother, but her mother lived in a trailer park in Tucson, surviving on Social Security. She wasn't buying anyone designer perfume. The letters changed too. Where once she'd written daily, now I was lucky to get 2 a week. The content shifted from promises and plans to mundane updates about the weather, her new apartment, when had she moved, the restaurant she'd tried downtown, who had she gone with. "I love you," still ended every letter, but the words felt thinner each time, like paper worn soft from too much handling. "She's slipping away," Rodriguez said one night, not unkindly. He'd seen my face after visits, the way I reread old letters instead of opening new ones. "She's just tired," I said. 5 years is a long time. It's going to be a lot longer than 5 years, Hermano. I knew he was right. My appeals kept failing, each rejection another brick in the wall between Rachel and me. But I held on, desperate to believe that love could survive anything, even this place that killed everything it touched. Year 7 brought computer access to the prison library, heavily restricted, monitored, and filtered, but still a window to the outside world I'd been cut off from. The internet had exploded while I'd been locked away. Social media was everywhere, people living their entire lives online for anyone to see. I wasn't supposed to access social networking sites, but Thompson's nephew had taught him a workaround using educational portals. It took me 3 weeks to find Rachel's Facebook profile, my heart hammering as I typed her name into the search bar during my library shift. The woman in the profile picture looked like Rachel, but not the Rachel who visited me. This woman glowed, highlighted hair, professional makeup, a smile that reached her eyes in a way it hadn't in the visiting room for months. Her relationship status, it's complicated. I scrolled through her timeline with shaking hands. Photos from a year ago showed her at restaurant openings, wine tastings, concerts, all the things we'd planned to do together someday. And in nearly every photo, the same man appeared, David Chen, according to the tags. Tall, clean-cut, with the easy smile of someone who'd never spent a night in a cell. "Just friends from work," she'd said. But friends don't pose like that. Friends don't have their arms around each other in every photo. Friends don't go to Napa Valley together for long weekends.
The comments under their photos made me sick. "You two are so cute together. About time you found happiness, Rach. He's perfect for you." And Rachel's responses, carefully worded but damning. Heart emojis, "Thanks, hun. And we're taking things slow. Taking things slow." While her fiancé rotted in prison for a crime he didn't commit, I found David's profile too. Regional manager at the hospital, not a nurse. MBA from Portland State. Owned a condo in the Pearl District. Drove a BMW. His photos showed a life of casual wealth. Ski trips, beach houses, international travel. Everything I could never give her, even before this nightmare began. There was one photo that broke me. Rachel at a New Year's Eve party, wearing a silver dress I'd never seen, champagne glass raised in a toast. The timestamp showed 11:58 p.m., December 31st. I remembered that night. I'd spent it in solitary after a fight in the yard I'd tried to break up. I'd marked the countdown to midnight with scratches on the concrete wall, imagining Rachel somewhere thinking of me. But she'd been in David's arms, kissing him at midnight while I shivered in the dark. I started checking obsessively during every library shift, watched their relationship unfold in real time through status updates and tagged locations. The weekend trips became more frequent. She moved into a new apartment, his apartment, though she never admitted it. The photos of them grew more intimate, more coupled, more permanent. "You've got to stop torturing yourself," Jackson, the library trustee, said when he found me staring at the screen one day. "That shit will drive you crazy." But I couldn't stop. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion, horrifying but impossible to look away from. Every photo was evidence of the life she was building without me, proof that her promises were evaporating like morning mist. The worst part was the visiting room pretense. She still came, less frequently now, still played the devoted fiancé, still talked about appeals and hope, and our future together, all while posting photos with David an hour after leaving the prison. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her through the plexiglass about the lies. But what was the point? I was serving life without parole. What right did I have to demand loyalty to a ghost? So I kept quiet, smiled when she visited, told her I loved her too. And after she left, I'd return to the library and torture myself with more photos of the life she was living without me. The papers arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because it was Meatloaf Day, and I was actually looking forward to it. Prison does that to you, makes you grateful for small, predictable comforts. Officer Bryant called me to the administrative office, and I knew something was wrong. Mail usually came during evening count. "Legal documents," Bryant said, sliding the manila envelope across the desk. "You'll want to read these in private." Back in my cell, Rodriguez took one look at my face and found somewhere else to be. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it contained stones instead of paper. Inside, the words swam before my eyes. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Rachel Chen née Morrison versus Marcus Lawson. She'd already taken his name. In the filing, she was Rachel Chen. The grounds were straightforward. Irreconcilable differences due to incarceration. Her lawyer, not David's paralegal brother, but an actual divorce attorney, had crafted language that was clinically brutal. 8 years of separation. No possibility of reconciliation. No shared assets to divide. A clean break, as if our decade together could be erased with a judge's signature. There was a letter from Rachel tucked behind the legal documents, her handwriting shaky. "Marcus, I don't know how to write this. I've started 100 times. You deserve more than a letter, but I'm too much of a coward to tell you in person. I can't do this anymore. 8 years of my life have passed in that visiting room. 8 years of promises that your next appeal will work, that new evidence will surface, that someone will finally believe you. I'm 34 years old. I want children. I want a partner who can be there for birthdays and holidays and random Tuesday nights. I know you're innocent. I've never doubted that. But knowing doesn't change anything. You're still there, and I'm still here, and the space between us has become unbearable. David is a good man. He makes me laugh. He holds me when I wake up crying about you. He understands that I'll always love you, but he also understands that love isn't enough. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not even asking for your understanding. I'm just asking you to let me go. I'm sorry for everything. Rachel, I read it 17 times, until the words blurred and lost meaning. Then I carefully refolded it, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on my small desk. You okay, hermano? Rodriguez had returned, concern creasing his weathered face. She filed for divorce. He nodded slowly, unsurprised. You gonna fight it? What was there to fight? I called the prison legal aid office, spoke to a harried public defender, who basically told me I had no grounds to contest. No conjugal visits meant no children. No assets meant nothing to divide. No freedom meant no future. Sign the papers, he advised. Make it easy on everyone. But nothing about this was easy. Signing meant accepting that 8 years of Rachel's visits, her letters, her promises, all of it had been a slow goodbye I'd been too desperate to recognize. It meant admitting that Rodriguez and Thompson, and all the others had been right. This place had a way of killing everything you loved, just slowly enough that you could watch it die. I tried calling her. 7 times over 3 days, burning through my commissary money. The phone rang and rang, never answered. On the 8th try, the number had been disconnected. That night I signed the papers. Marcus Lawson, in tight, controlled script that looked nothing like the excited signature I'd once practiced for our wedding day. Rodriguez witnessed it, his name next to mine a reminder that this was my family, now other lost men in concrete cages. Officer Bryant took the envelope the next morning, and with it, the last legal claim I had to the world outside these walls. Rachel Chen née Morrison had moved on. Rachel Lawson had never existed at all. After the divorce was finalized, I kept writing to her. Not to the Rachel Chen who lived in David's Pearl District condo, but to the Rachel Morrison who'd pressed her palm against prison glass and sworn to wait forever. I wrote to a ghost, and I knew it, but the ritual kept me sane. The letters always came back. Returned to sender, stamped in red ink, like a slap across the face. I kept them all in a box under my bunk. Unopened rejection after unopened rejection. Rodriguez thought I was crazy. Why torture yourself, man? But he didn't understand. Writing those letters was the only time I felt human anymore. For 20 minutes each night, I could pretend someone out there still cared about my thoughts, my dreams, my dwindling hopes. Dear Rachel, I wrote, the library got new books today. I thought of you when I saw they'd added that mystery series you loved. Do you remember reading them to me on Sunday mornings? You do different voices for all the characters. Dear Rachel, Rodriguez's daughter visited today. She's 15 now, wants to be a doctor. It made me think about the kids we planned to have. Did you ever pick names? I still think about the list we made that night after too much wine. Dear Rachel, they're talking about new DNA testing methods in the news. My lawyer says it might help. I know you've moved on, but I wanted you to know I haven't given up. I can't give up. It's all I have left. Some letters were angry, raw with betrayal. How could you stand in front of me for 8 years and lie? Every visit, every I love you, every promise, was any of it real? Or was I just a charity case? A way to feel good about yourself until something better came along? Others were desperate, pathetic. I dream about you every night. Sometimes you're 25 again, laughing at my terrible coding jokes. Sometimes you're older, holding children that look like us. I wake up and reach for you, and hit concrete walls instead. Do you ever dream of me? But most were simply updates on a life that had stopped mattering. Martinez got paroled today. Thompson's teaching himself Spanish. I'm working on an appeal based on ineffective counsel. The law library has become my second home. I understand things now I wish I'd known during the trial. Maybe if I'd been my own advocate from the start. Writing became my only outlet for the fury that threatened to consume me. Better to pour it onto paper than let it poison me from the inside. In those letters, I could say all the things I'd been too proud or too afraid to say during her visits. I could be vulnerable, angry, hopeful, destroyed. All the emotions I'd learned to hide behind prison walls. The returned letters piled up, but I kept writing. 100 letters, 200, a one-sided conversation with someone who'd already forgotten my voice. Then one day, I stopped. It wasn't dramatic. I simply sat down to write and found I had nothing left to say. The ghost of Rachel Morrison had finally faded, taking with her the last piece of the man I used to be. What remained was harder, focused, with a clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose. I packed the returned letters in a box and asked Rodriguez to store them with his things. Finally letting go, he asked. No, I said, finally getting started. That night, instead of writing to Rachel, I wrote to the Innocence Project, then to private attorneys, then to journalists who covered wrongful convictions. If nobody outside these walls cared about Marcus Lawson anymore, then I'd have to care enough for everyone. The man who'd spent years writing love letters to a ghost was gone. In his place was someone who understood that hope without action was just another form of imprisonment, and I was done being anybody's prisoner, especially my own. By year 10, I'd become a ghost that haunted the law library. 6 hours a day, every day, surrounded by case law and precedents, teaching myself the language that had condemned me. The other inmates started calling me counselor, half joking, half respectful. I helped with their appeals, their motions, their desperate attempts to shave years off sentences that stretched like highways into darkness. Thompson got 3 years knocked off his sentence because I found a procedural error in his trial. Martinez's son got custody of his kids because I helped write the briefs, small victories that meant everything in a place where hope was contraband. But my own case remained stubbornly locked. Every appeal hit the same walls, lack of new evidence, procedural bars, the grinding machinery of a system that preferred finality to truth. I memorized every word of my trial transcript, found dozens of errors my original lawyer had missed, but none of it mattered without something new, something concrete. You're becoming obsessed, Jackson warned me one afternoon. He'd been in the library longer than anyone, a lifer who'd found peace in books. I've seen it before. Men who think if they just learn enough law, they can think their way out of here. What else am I supposed to do? I shot back, surrounded by towers of legal volumes. Accept it. Rot quietly. Sometimes accepting is the only way to survive. But I couldn't accept it. Not when I knew Gregory Walsh's real killer was out there, free, probably living a normal life while I counted days in 6 by 8 foot increments. So I kept digging, following every thread, every possibility. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a new inmate named Kyle Harrison, transferred from county on a drug charge. During his intake, I overheard him mention the Riverside District, the neighborhood where Walsh had died. I used to run that area back in 2004, he bragged to his cellmate. Knew everyone, saw everything. My heart nearly stopped. I approached him carefully. Prison taught you that information was currency, and you never showed desperation. Riverside in 2004, I said casually. I had some friends there, maybe you knew them. We talked circles around each other for days before I finally asked about the Walsh murder. His face changed immediately. Oh man, that was heavy. Everyone knew that wasn't random. What do you mean? Kyle glanced around, lowered his voice. Walsh was into some shit, gambling debts, borrowed from the wrong people. Word was he was supposed to pay up that night but tried to run instead. My pulse raced. You know who he owed? Tommy Morrison ran that action. Mean bastard, probably doing life somewhere by now. Thomas Morrison. I'd never heard the name during my trial. My lawyer had never investigated Walsh's background, never looked for alternative suspects. The prosecution had painted it as a robbery gone wrong, and my court-appointed defender had barely challenged their narrative. I spent the next 3 months tracking down everything I could about Thomas Morrison, old newspaper archives, court records, prison databases. He'd been arrested 2 years after Walsh's murder on unrelated charges, had been in and out of the system ever since, currently serving time in Nevada for assault. I wrote to him, a carefully crafted letter that took me a week to compose. No response. I wrote again, and again. 6 letters over 2 months, each one refining my approach, my appeal to whatever conscience might exist in a career criminal. Finally, a response. Stop writing me. But that was something. That was contact. I shifted tactics, reached out to other inmates who'd done time in Nevada, built a network of connections that eventually got me a phone introduction through someone's cousin's cellmate. Prison has its own 6 degrees of separation. The call lasted 3 minutes. Morrison's voice was rough, suspicious. I don't know you. Don't know nothing about no murder. I'm doing life for Gregory Walsh, I said quickly. I didn't kill him. Maybe you know who did. A long pause. Even if I did, why would I tell you? Because I've got nothing to lose and all the time in the world to make your life complicated. Or we can help each other. He hung up. But 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. No confession, no details, just one line. Get a real lawyer and maybe we'll talk. It wasn't much, but after 10 years of nothing, it was everything. I had a name, a connection, a thread to pull. Thomas Morrison knew something about Gregory Walsh's death. Now I just had to find a way to make him tell it.
Year 15 brought the revolution I'd been praying for. Advanced DNA testing that could pull profiles from degraded samples previously thought worthless. The technology had solved cold cases across the country, freed dozens of innocent men, and now it was my turn to roll the dice. The problem was money. Real testing by real experts cost more than I'd see in a lifetime of prison labor. That's when Margaret Chen entered my life. No relation to David, just a cosmic joke of a coincidence. She was a junior attorney with the Northwest Innocence Project, fresh out of law school, eager to make her mark. Your case file is a mess, she said during our first meeting, spreading documents across the metal table. Your original lawyer should be disbarred. But messy is good. Messy means mistakes, and mistakes mean opportunities. She was 27, brilliant, and treated me like a human being instead of a conviction number. For the first time in years, I felt something like hope stirring in my chest. The blood evidence from the scene was never properly tested, she explained. They found blood on Walsh's clothing that didn't match his type, but DNA testing in 2004 was expensive. The prosecution argued it was contamination. Your lawyer never pushed for testing. Can we test it now? If it still exists, evidence preservation in this state is inconsistent. It took Margaret 6 months to track down the evidence box, stored in a basement facility that had flooded twice since my conviction. Another 3 months to get a court order for testing. The state fought every step, arguing stulness, claiming procedural bars, throwing up every obstacle they could, but Margaret was relentless. She filed motion after motion, cited cases I'd never found, made arguments that sang with precision and fury. Watching her work was like seeing what my original defense could have been if anyone had cared enough to fight. The day the court approved testing, Rodriguez actually smiled, a rare occurrence that meant more than any congratulation. Word spread through the prison. Other lifers stopped by my cell, offering cautious encouragement. Hope is dangerous in prison. We'd all seen men destroyed by it. But sometimes it's all that keeps you breathing. The testing took months. Backlogged labs, bureaucratic delays, the grinding slowness of a system that moves like molasses unless you're headed to death row. Margaret visited monthly with updates, always careful not to oversell possibilities. Even if the DNA doesn't match you, it might not be enough, she warned. We'd need to match it to someone else, prove they had motive and opportunity. What about Thomas Morrison? She knew about my correspondence with Morrison, had tried reaching out herself with no response. He's not talking. His lawyer shut down all communication. But I had something Margaret didn't: time and connections. Through the prison network, I learned Morrison was sick, lung cancer, stage 3. Dying men sometimes develop consciences, or at least the desire to clear ledgers before meeting whatever waited on the other side. I wrote him one more letter. Tommy, they're testing the blood from Walsh's clothes. When it doesn't match me, they'll start looking for who it does match. You're already in the system. How long before they connect those dots? Or you could control the narrative. Man dying of cancer confesses to old murder, clears innocent man. You'd go out as someone who finally did right. Your family would have that to hold on to. Think about it. Time's running out for both of us. Marcus. No response. But 3 weeks later, Margaret's face told me everything when she walked into the visiting room. She was trying to stay professional, but her eyes were shining. The blood doesn't match you, she said. Not even close. Different blood type, different genetic markers. It's definitive. That blood came from Walsh's killer, and it wasn't you. 15 years after my conviction, science had finally called the state a liar. But we both knew this was just the beginning. A mismatch wasn't an exoneration. We needed more. There's something else, Margaret said, leaning forward. I got a call yesterday. Thomas Morrison's lawyer. He wants to meet. The ground shifted under my feet. After 15 years of pushing against a locked door, it was finally starting to open. All because of blood on a dead man's shirt and a killer running out of time. Thomas Morrison looked like death warmed over. When they wheeled him into the deposition room at the Nevada Federal Medical Center, I saw my future if the DNA hadn't cleared me. A skeleton wrapped in loose skin, eyes sunk deep in a skull that seemed too large for the wasted body beneath. Margaret had fought for months to get this meeting. Morrison's lawyer, a public defender named Hartley, who looked as tired as his client, sat beside him with a digital recorder and a stack of immunity agreements. The federal prosecutor, brought in to oversee the confession, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Let's be clear, Morrison wheezed, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. I ain't doing this for him. He pointed a skeletal finger at me. I'm doing this for my kids, so they know their old man wasn't complete trash. We understand, Margaret said smoothly. Please, in your own words, tell us about October 15th, 2004. Morrison coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made everyone in the room flinch. When he spoke, the words came slowly, carefully, like he was pulling them from some deep place he'd kept locked for 20 years. Gregory Walsh owed me 40 grand, gambling debts. He'd been dodging me for weeks, thought he was smart. But I had eyes everywhere in Riverside back then. Knew he was meeting someone at that office building that night. Some deal he thought would get him the money. What kind of deal? The prosecutor asked. Don't know, don't care. I waited in the alley. When he came out alone, counting cash, I confronted him. Told him that money was mine now. Morrison paused, lost in the memory. His eyes focused on something none of us could see. He laughed at me. Said the 40 grand was gone, spent on lawyers to keep his wife from finding out about his gambling. Said the 5 grand in his hand was all he had and I couldn't have it. What happened then? I shot him. Simple, matter of fact, like he was describing the weather. Twice in the chest. He dropped. I took the money, left him there. Whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. What about Marcus Lawson? Morrison shrugged, bones visible through his hospital gown. Never saw him. His car was there, yeah, but lots of cars were there. Kid was in the wrong place at the wrong time. When they arrested someone else, I figured it was my lucky day. Kept my mouth shut. For 20 years, I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. You kept your mouth shut while I rotted in prison. He looked at me then, really looked at me. Yeah, I did. And I'd do it again if I wasn't dying. That's the truth. I ain't looking for forgiveness, especially not from you. But the cancer's got me thinking about what I leave behind. My kids are grown now. They got families. Every time they Google their old man, this is gonna come up. At least now it'll say I told the truth in the end. The confession went on for 3 hours. Every detail, every moment, backed up by knowledge only the killer could have. Where Walsh was standing, how he fell, the type of gun used. Morrison had kept it for years before dumping it. He even remembered the weather that night, the light rain that had started just as he pulled the trigger. Why didn't forensics find gunpowder residue on Mr. Lawson? Margaret asked. Morrison actually laughed, though it turned into another coughing fit. Because he didn't shoot nobody. Jesus, how bad was this investigation? Very bad, as it turned out. The prosecutor looked increasingly uncomfortable as Morrison revealed how easy it had been to avoid detection. No one had looked into Walsh's debts, his gambling problem, his connection to Morrison's crew. They'd found a convenient suspect with a car in the area and built their case backwards from there. The blood on Walsh's shirt, Margaret pressed. How did your blood get on him? Cut my hand on his watch when I was checking for the money. Didn't even notice until later. Wrapped it up, forgot about it. You guys were saying that blood didn't match your boy? DNA analysis confirms it wasn't Marcus, the prosecutor said quietly. Then there you go. Mystery solved. Can I die in peace now? But there was more paperwork, more questions, more recordings. Morrison signed affidavit after affidavit, his signature getting shakier with each document. By the end, he could barely hold the pen. As they wheeled him out, he stopped at the door. Hey Lawson. I looked at him, this dying man who'd stolen 2 decades of my life with his silence. I know it don't mean nothing, but that woman of yours, the one who used to visit you, I saw her on the news when they covered your trial. She really believed you were innocent. That's something, I guess. Then he was gone, back to the medical ward to die with a slightly cleaner conscience. I sat in the empty room with Margaret, trying to process what had just happened. This is it, she said, barely containing her excitement. With his confession and the DNA evidence, we can file for immediate release. The state won't fight this. They can't. Marcus, you're going home. Home. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Where was home for someone who'd been buried alive for 20 years? How long? I asked. Maybe 6 months for all the paperwork. A year at most. After 20 years, what's a few more months? She was right, of course. But those months stretched ahead like an eternity. Now that freedom was actually possible. For 2 decades I'd survived by killing hope, by accepting my fate. Now hope was back, burning in my chest like swallowed fire, and I didn't know if I could contain it. There's something else, Margaret said carefully. The state will offer a settlement, wrongful conviction compensation. It won't give you back the years, but it'll be substantial, enough to start over. Start over. Like you could just reboot a life that had been paused at 25. But I nodded, let her explain the process, the numbers they might offer, the negotiations ahead. Later, back in my cell, Rodriguez was waiting. So, he asked. He confessed to everything. Rodriguez closed his eyes, crossed himself. Thanks be to God. It's not over yet. Months of legal stuff still, but it's over, he said firmly. The door's open now, Hermano. All you got to do is walk through it. That night, I lay in my bunk and tried to imagine freedom. What would it feel like to wake up without counts, without bars, without the constant weight of injustice? I thought about Rachel, about her saying she couldn't wait for a maybe. Well, it wasn't a maybe anymore, but I wasn't that 25-year-old kid anymore either. The man who'd walked into this place believing in justice and love and happy endings had died somewhere around year 10. What emerged now would be something else entirely, harder, smarter, with a fortune in settlement, money, and 2 decades of lessons learned the hardest way possible. Thomas Morrison had given me back my freedom. What I did with it would be up to me. The final year crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every day brought new paperwork, new hearings, new bureaucratic delays. The state, embarrassed by the magnitude of their failure, suddenly found endless procedural requirements that needed satisfying. But Margaret was a pit bull, refusing to let them drag their feet. The media caught wind of the story. 20 years stolen. The Marcus Lawson story became a cause célèbre. Reporters wanted interviews. Documentary makers sent requests. Advocacy groups held rallies. I gave a few carefully managed phone interviews, but mostly I kept my head down. Fame based on injustice felt like another kind of prison. The settlement negotiations began in month 3. The state's initial offer was insulting, $2 million, as if you could put a price on 2 decades of life. Margaret laughed in their faces. Mr. Lawson was a software engineer with a promising career. Project his earnings over 20 years, add pain and suffering, the destruction of his relationship, the psychological trauma. We're looking at minimum 10 million, and that's being generous. They went back and forth for months. I watched from the sidelines, learning how the system that had crushed me now tried to minimize its liability. Everything had a dollar amount, each year of false imprisonment, each appeal denied, each day Rachel had visited before giving up. Rodriguez became my advisor through it all. He'd seen enough men get out to know the pitfalls. Don't take the first check they wave at you, he counseled. And when you get out, don't go crazy. I've seen guys blow through their settlement in a year, trying to make up for lost time. You can't buy back 20 years. The state finally agreed to 10 million, paid in structured installments, unless I wanted a lump sum of 8 million. Margaret recommended the lump sum. Invest it wisely, and you'll never have to work again. But Marcus, please get a financial advisor. The world you're returning to is very different from the one you left. She wasn't wrong. During my final months, I spent every allowed hour in the computer lab, teaching myself about the modern world. Smartphones, social media, cryptocurrency, the gig economy. Technology had exploded while I'd been frozen in time. The programming languages I'd known were now obsolete, museum pieces in the history of code. I studied Rachel's life too, through the digital breadcrumbs she'd left. The wedding photos with David, a summer ceremony in the wine country, the birth announcements, Sophie Marie Shen, 7 pounds 3 ounces, the real estate listings, a 4-bedroom colonial in Lake Oswego. She'd built the life we'd dreamed about, just with someone else. David's LinkedIn profile showed a successful career trajectory, from regional manager to VP of operations at the hospital system. Their Christmas card photos, publicly shared on Facebook, showed a family that looked like a lifestyle magazine spread. Perfect smiles, perfect home, perfect life built on the foundation of my nightmare. The rage that had sustained me for years crystallized into something colder, more calculated. I wasn't interested in destroying what Rachel had built. That would be petty, small. No, I wanted her to see what she'd thrown away. I wanted her to understand that her maybe had become a certainty, and she'd given up too soon. 3 weeks before my release, I got an unexpected visitor, David Chen himself, looking uncomfortable in the prison visiting room. "Mr. Lawson," he said, sitting stiffly across from me, "I hope you don't mind. I felt I should come."
I studied him, older than his photos suggested, worry lines creasing his forehead, wedding ring catching the fluorescent lights. Rachel doesn't know I'm here, he continued. She's been following the news about your case. It's been hard on her. I kept my voice level, but Rodriguez would have recognized the danger in it. She loved you, loves you in a way. But 20 years, man. She waited 8. That's more than most would have done. What do you want, David? He sighed, ran a hand through his thinning hair. I want to know if you're planning to contact her when you get out. Our kids, they don't know about you. We've built a life. I'm just asking man to man that you let us be. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. This man living my life, sleeping beside my fiancée, raising children that should have been mine, asking me to disappear quietly. I'll tell you what, David, I said, leaning forward. I'll make you a deal. I won't contact Rachel or your children. They're innocent in this. But you're going to see me around. We're going to be neighbors, friends even, and every day you're going to wonder what I'm thinking, what I'm planning. Every time Rachel looks at me, you're going to see something in her eyes that'll make you question everything. His face had gone pale. Are you threatening me? No, I'm promising you that I'm going to live my best life, visibly and successfully. If that threatens you, that's your problem. He left without another word. That night I told Rodriguez about the visit. You're playing with fire, hermano. I've been burned for 20 years. I think I can handle a little more heat. 2 weeks later, the final paperwork came through. March 15th, 2025, would be my last day as inmate my B4789, my last day in the tomb that had held me since I was 25. Margaret brought clothes for my release, a simple suit that felt alien against my skin. The check was already deposited in an account she'd helped me set up. $8 million, the price tag on my stolen decades. What's the first thing you're going to do? She asked as we waited for the final processing. Buy a house, I said without hesitation, in Lake Oswego. Nice neighborhood, good schools, the kind of place where successful people live. She gave me a look but didn't comment. She'd done her job, freed an innocent man. What he did with that freedom was his business. The gates opened at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and possibility. I walked out carrying a single box of possessions, $8 million richer and 20 years poorer, with a plan 2 decades in the making. Rachel thought she couldn't wait for a maybe. Time to show her what she'd missed betting against a sure thing. The previous owners relocated to Singapore, Patricia explained. They're motivated sellers, full asking price and it's yours. I'll take it. She blinked. Don't you want to see the other properties, or negotiate? No, this is perfect. $2.3 million, cash transaction, 30-day closing. I signed papers that would have taken me 10 lifetimes to afford in my old life. The settlement money made it feel like monopoly currency, meaningless numbers that somehow translated to real property. I furnished the house in a week, hiring a decorator who specialized in masculine contemporary. The result looked like a magazine spread, all clean lines and neutral tones, beautiful and soulless as a hotel. But it photographed well, which was all that mattered for what came next. My transformation took longer. 20 years of prison food and weight routines had left me lean but institutional. I hired a personal trainer, a nutritionist, a stylist, $1,000 suits that fit like armor, a car that cost more than I'd made in 5 years before prison, a Tesla that drove itself while I pretended to understand the technology. You're like a butterfly, my trainer Jake said after 2 months. Complete metamorphosis. He didn't know about the caterpillar stage. 2 decades in a concrete cocoon. This wasn't transformation, it was revenge sculpted into muscle and wrapped in designer clothes. The day I moved in, I saw her. Rachel was in her front yard, planting flowers while Sophie and James played on the lawn. She looked up as the moving truck rumbled past, shielding her eyes against the sun. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before she looked away, not recognizing the stranger in expensive sunglasses. I wanted to call out, to see her face when she realized who'd just become her neighbor. But patience had been my only companion for 20 years. I could wait a little longer. That night, I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the props of success, and mapped out the next phase. Social media profiles showcasing my new life, charitable donations that would get me invited to the right events, golf club membership where David played. Every move calculated to insert myself into their world without seeming to try. Rodriguez would have called it unhealthy. Margaret would have suggested therapy. But they didn't understand what it was like to have your life stolen in public, to have the person who promised forever give up when things got hard. This wasn't about destruction, it was about demonstration, showing Rachel the man she'd abandoned, the life she'd forfeited, the future she'd traded for safety and certainty. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Wrongfully convicted man wins $10 million settlement. The article included an old photo from my trial and a recent one from my release. Side by side, they looked like different people. Good. Let her see it. Let her wonder. Let her remember. Tomorrow, I'd accidentally run into them at the grocery store. Next week, I'd join the homeowners association. Within a month, I'd be woven into the fabric of their community, a constant reminder of choices made and unmade. Rachel thought she couldn't wait for a maybe. Time to show her what certainty looked like. Sellers, full asking price and it's yours. I'll take it. She blinked. Don't you want to see the other properties, or negotiate? No, this is perfect. $2.3 million, cash transaction, 30-day closing. I signed papers that would have taken me 10 lifetimes to afford in my old life. The settlement money made it feel like monopoly currency, meaningless numbers that somehow translated to real property. I furnished the house in a week. Hiring freedom hit me like a sledgehammer. Standing outside the prison gates, waiting for my Uber, Margaret had to explain the app 3 times. I felt like an alien dropped on a foreign planet. Cars looked different, sleeker. Everyone stared at glowing rectangles in their hands. The air itself felt different, thinner, less structured, terrifyingly infinite. The halfway house was a required first stop. 30 days of reintegration support. My roommate was a kid doing 6 months for theft, who taught me about Instagram, TikTok, and how to use contactless payment. He thought my flip phone confusion was hilarious until I told him why I'd been away. 20 years. Bro, you missed everything. 9/11, Obama, Trump, COVID, everything. COVID, a global pandemic that had shut down the world while I was locked away. Obama, the first black president. Trump, the reality TV president. History had marched on without me, and I was a tourist in my own timeline. My first smartphone felt like alien technology. The salesperson, barely out of high school, showed me features with the patience reserved for elderly grandparents. Apps for everything. Banking, food delivery, dating, even meditation. The world I'd left required human interaction. This new world let you live entirely through a screen. Would you like to set up Face ID? She asked. I didn't even know what that meant. 20 years ago, passwords were cutting edge. Now my phone could recognize my face, my fingerprint, probably my soul if I gave it permission. The first time I Googled myself, I nearly threw the phone away. Marcus Lawson, exonerated after 20 years. Thousands of results. My face, aged and institutionalized, staring back from news sites, blogs, true crime forums, strangers discussing my case, my life, Rachel's abandonment. The internet had turned my tragedy into content. Finding Rachel took 30 seconds. Her Instagram was public, a curated feed of family perfection, beach vacations, birthday parties, anniversary dinners. 10 years of life I'd missed, displayed in filtered squares. Sophie looked like Rachel, same eyes, same smile. James had David's jawline but Rachel's laugh, captured in videos of soccer games and school plays. I scrolled deeper, obsessively finding the exact moment her life diverged from mine. The last photos from our time together had been deleted, but there was a gap. 2 years of sparse posts before David appeared. Then explosion of happiness, or at least its digital performance. Her most recent post stopped my heart. A family photo in front of a house with a sold sign. New adventures await. Goodbye apartment life. Hello dream home in Lake Oswego. Lake Oswego, the suburb we'd driven through once. Young and dreaming, pointing at houses we'd never afford. One day she'd said, squeezing my hand. Now she was moving there with another man, another life, another future that should have been ours. The private investigator Margaret recommended was thorough. Within a week I had everything. Their new address, 1847 Lakeshore Drive. David's salary, $400K plus bonuses. Their mortgage details, $1.2 million, 30-year fixed. The kids' schools, Forest Hills Elementary, top rated. Their routines, their weaknesses, their whole life laid out like a blueprint. You planning something I should know about? The PI asked, sliding the folder across the coffee shop table. Just information gathering, I said. Know thy neighbor. He gave me a look that said he'd heard that before. Word of advice, whatever you're thinking, the best revenge is living well. Take your money, move to Hawaii, forget they exist. But I couldn't forget. 20 years of thinking about Rachel had carved grooves in my brain too deep to abandon. I didn't want to hurt her. I wanted her to see me, really see me. Not the convicted killer she'd abandoned, but the man I could have been if the system hadn't failed us both. House hunting in Lake Oswego with $8 million was surreal. The realtor, a polished woman named Patricia, treated me like royalty once she verified my funds. Cash buyer, her eyes lit up. Oh, we'll find you something perfect. What are you looking for? Something near Lakeshore Drive. Walking distance would be ideal. The universe has a sense of humor. The perfect house sat 3 properties down from Rachel's new address. A modern craftsman with clean lines and walls of glass overlooking the lake. 4 bedrooms I didn't need. A kitchen I'd have to learn to use. A life-sized for a family I'd never have. The previous owners relocated to Singapore. Patricia explained. They motivate.
The private investigator's report read like a novel about the life I should have lived. Rachel Chen née Morrison Lawson. She'd kept my name for 2 years after the divorce, only changing it when she married David. Senior charge nurse at Providence Hospital, specializing in pediatric care. Volunteer at Sophie's school. Yoga on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Book club every 3rd Wednesday. A life of careful routines and calculated normalcy. David's story was more interesting. His rise from middle management to hospital VP wasn't just talent. His father-in-law sat on the board. The real estate developments came from family money, investments that turned Lake Oswego properties into gold mines. But there were cracks. A DUI from 5 years ago, quietly handled. Therapy appointments every Monday. Couples counseling, the PI suspected. A membership at a downtown gym where his trainer was a 25-year-old named Madison, who posted a lot of late-night selfies from work. Their finances told another story. Comfortable but stretched. Private school tuition. The massive mortgage. 2 car payments. Country club fees. They were house-rich and cash-poor, maintaining an image that cost more than David's salary could sustain, the kind of pressure that made people vulnerable to opportunities. The children were innocent variables in my equation. Sophie, 7 going on 17, already showing her mother's determination in gymnastics competitions and honor roll certificates. James, 5, quieter, more like the David I'd observed, thoughtful, anxious, always seeking approval. The PI had included their schedules, but I pushed those pages aside. They weren't part of this. He's been asking about you, the PI said during our follow-up meeting. David Chen made some discreet inquiries about your finances, your plans. Let him ask. He also hired someone to look into your prison record. Wants to know if you were violent inside. I almost laughed. Violence was for people who lacked patience and planning. 20 years had taught me that the most devastating attacks were the ones nobody saw coming. Social media became my weapon of choice. I hired a consultant, yes, that's a job now, to craft my online presence. Professional photography sessions in my new home, at charity events, at the yacht club I'd joined despite not owning a boat. Every post carefully curated to show success without ostentation, wealth without vulgarity. You want to seem approachable but aspirational, Meredith, the consultant explained. Like success is effortless for you. Within a month, I had followers I'd never met commenting on my inspiring journey and incredible resilience. The wrongful conviction became my origin story, transformed from tragedy to triumph through the alchemy of digital narrative. I made sure my profiles were public, made sure every achievement, every milestone, every carefully staged moment of my new life was visible to anyone who cared to look, and I knew Rachel would look. The PI confirmed she'd viewed my LinkedIn profile 6 times in 2 weeks. The real masterstroke came from studying their social circles. The Chens moved in predictable orbits: hospital fundraisers, school events, neighborhood gatherings. I began donating strategically, $50,000 to the hospital's new pediatric wing, in honor of the nurses who serve our community, $25,000 total to Forest Hills Elementary's STEM program. Suddenly, I was invited everywhere they went. My first appearance at a hospital gala caused the reaction I'd expected. I saw Rachel before she saw me, standing by the silent auction in a black dress that reminded me of one she'd worn to my cousin's wedding 25 years ago. When she turned and our eyes met, her champagne glass slipped. David caught it, his reflexes faster than his wife's composure. I approached slowly, giving them time to process, to decide whether to flee or face me. Rachel, I said simply. David. She'd aged well, fine lines that suggested laughter more than sorrow, though I wondered how much of that was Botox. But her eyes were the same, that particular shade of green that had haunted my cell. Marcus. My name came out strangled. We heard about your release. Congratulations. Thank you. 20 years late, but justice finally prevailed. David's hand moved to the small of her back, possessive, protective. We're glad you're free. It must be an adjustment. It is, I agreed. But I'm adapting. Actually, we're neighbors now. I bought the Craftsman on Lakeshore. Rachel's face went white. The glass house. That's the one. Small world, isn't it? The conversation continued in painful pleasantries, but I'd already won. The shock in Rachel's eyes, the tension in David's jaw. They knew their carefully constructed world had just developed a fracture. Over the following weeks, I documented their digital unraveling. Rachel's posts became less frequent, then stopped entirely. David, meanwhile, increased his activity. Photos of family outings, date nights, declarations of love that felt like territory marking. My beautiful wife, so blessed, wouldn't change a thing. The gentleman doth protest too much. Their friends noticed. Comments on their posts shifted from genuine to concerned. Everything okay appeared under a photo of them at dinner, Rachel's smile not quite reaching her eyes. Their book club friends whispered at the coffee shop I'd started frequenting. The neighborhood watched and waited. I played the perfect neighbor. Friendly waves from the driveway, accepting mail when they were away, hiring the same landscaping company, the same pool service, becoming part of the invisible infrastructure of their lives. Never pushy, never inappropriate, just present. A constant reminder of what had been and what could have been. The private investigator brought me one final report. You should know, he said. They're discussing moving. Already, she wants to. He's resisting. Their daughter just made the competitive gymnastics team, doesn't want to change schools. It's causing friction. I felt something I hadn't expected. Satisfaction tinged with emptiness. Was this what I'd wanted? To destabilize their lives, to prove I could affect them as profoundly as they'd affected me. There's more, the PI continued. Rachel's been searching for you online, not just casual browsing, hours of it, going back through old news articles, your case files, everything. She's been to a lawyer, divorce lawyer, no, criminal defense, same firm that handled your appeal. That was unexpected. I dismissed the PI and sat in my perfect house, pondering this development. Why would Rachel need a criminal defense attorney? What was she afraid I knew? Or what was she afraid she'd done? That night I created a new document on my laptop, a timeline of Rachel's life during my incarceration, the visits that tapered off, the relationship with David that began while she was still promising to wait, the divorce filed when hope seemed lost, the life built on the assumption I'd never return. Looking at it objectively, I could almost understand. 8 years was a long time to wait for a maybe. She'd been 34, wanting children, stability, a partner who could be present. David offered certainty, where I offered only imprisoned promises, but understanding and forgiving were different things. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with the consequences of that choice made flesh.
living 3 houses down, a daily reminder that sometimes maybes become reality. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Can we talk? Minor R. 20 years I'd waited for her to reach out. Now with her message glowing on my screen, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say. The investigation had given me facts, but facts weren't truth. Truth was messier, more painful, less satisfying than the narrative I'd built in my head. I didn't respond. Let her wonder, wait, experience a fraction of the uncertainty I'd lived with for 2 decades. Tomorrow I'd decide whether to answer. Tonight, I'd review the files one more time, looking for the answer to a question I wasn't sure I wanted to ask. What if she'd been waiting for a maybe too? I didn't respond to Rachel's text for a week. Let her feel what I'd felt all those years, the agony of silence, the weight of unanswered questions. Instead, I focused on phase 2 of my integration into Lake Oswego society. The country club membership was key. Laurelwood Golf Club, where David played every Saturday morning with hospital board members and real estate developers. The kind of place where deals were made on the back nine and futures were decided over whiskey in the clubhouse. My application sailed through. Wrongfully convicted millionaire was exactly the kind of redemption story they loved. Plus, my donation to their youth program didn't hurt. Within 2 weeks, I was on the driving range, relearning a game I'd played exactly twice in my life before prison. Marcus Lawson. The pro shop manager, Tim, pumped my hand enthusiastically. Heard about your story. Incredible. Just incredible. You looking for a regular foursome? I'm pretty rusty, I admitted. Haven't played in a while. He laughed. We'll get you sorted. Actually, David Chen's group is usually looking for a 4th. Great guy, knows everyone. Want me to introduce you? The irony was delicious. That would be perfect. My first round with David's group was scheduled for the following Saturday. I spent the week with a private instructor, learning not just golf but the language of wealth, how to talk about investments without sounding desperate, how to mention my settlement without seeming gauche, how to project success as if it were as natural as breathing. The transformation was more than physical. Prison had taught me to read people, to understand what they wanted before they knew themselves. 20 years of studying human nature in its rawest form had made me an expert in manipulation, refined as conversation. I hired a personal assistant, Claire, who managed my calendar and made sure I appeared at the right events. The children's hospital luncheon where Rachel would be honored for her volunteer work, the school fundraiser where Sophie would perform, the neighborhood wine tasting David would host. My presence inevitable but never forced. You're building quite the reputation, Claire mentioned while reviewing my schedule. Everyone's talking about the mysterious new resident who's revitalizing the community. Mysterious. I like that. Let them wonder, speculate, create their own narratives about who I was and what I wanted. The truth was both simpler and more complex than they could imagine. The house became my stage set. I hosted intimate dinners for carefully selected guests, never the Chens directly, but always people in their orbit. The prosecutor who'd helped secure my release. Business leaders who'd read about my story. Even Margaret came once, eyes wide at what her work had unleashed. This is quite a setup, she said, sipping wine that cost more than her hourly rate. You've done well for yourself. I'm making up for lost time. She gave me a look I recognized, the same one she'd worn when I'd insisted on deposing Thomas Morrison. Just be careful, Marcus. You've been given a second chance. Don't waste it on the past. But the past was all I had. The future I'd planned was living 3 houses down with another man. The present was just a performance, and I was getting very good at my role. The Saturday golf game arrived. David's discomfort was palpable when he saw me on the first tee, but social politeness won. His regular partners, a cardiac surgeon and a commercial developer, were more interested in my story than the undertones. 20 years, Dr. Morrison, no relation to Thomas, whistled. How'd you survive? 1 day at a time, I said, lining up my drive. You learn to focus on what you can control, not what you can't. The ball sailed straight and true, better than I'd hoped. David's shot hooked left into the rough. By the 9th hole, I'd won them over. Stories carefully crafted to entertain without dwelling on the darkness. Investment advice that sounded casual but showed serious knowledge. By the time we reached the clubhouse, I had invitations to 2 dinner parties and a sailing trip. You should join us regularly, Dr. Morrison suggested. David, what do you think? David forced a smile. Of course, the more the merrier. That night, Rachel texted again, please, we need to talk. This time I responded, about what? Everything. The past, the present, why you're here. I'm here because I bought a house, same as you. You know that's not what I mean. Then be specific, Rachel. 20 years taught me not to assume anything. 3 dots appeared and disappeared repeatedly as she typed and deleted responses. Finally, can you meet me at Café Noir tomorrow, 2 p.m.? David will be at work. The secrecy was telling. I agreed, though I made sure Claire scheduled a very visible lunch at the country club immediately after. Alibis were habit now, even for innocent meetings. That night, I refined my plan. The goal had never been destruction. That was too simple, too crude. I wanted something more elegant, for Rachel to question every choice she'd made, for David to wonder if his wife still loved him or the ghost who'd returned, for them both to understand that some decisions couldn't be undone. Some doors once closed changed the architecture of your entire life. I studied my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face staring back bore little resemblance to the scared 25-year-old who'd been arrested or the hardened 45-year-old who'd walked out of prison. This was someone new, successful, confident, dangerous in his patience. This was who I could have been if the system hadn't failed me, if Rachel had waited, if 20 years hadn't been stolen. My phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. David had posted a photo from dinner. Date night with my amazing wife. Grateful every day for this life we've built together. Rachel's smile in the photo looked forced, her eyes focused somewhere beyond the camera. The comments were telling. Friends offering heart emojis and couple goals platitudes, but fewer than usual. The community was watching, waiting, sensing the tremor in their foundation. I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a letter this time, but a business plan. If I was going to stay in Lake Oswego, I needed more than settlement money and careful schemes. I needed purpose beyond proximity to the past. A tech incubator focused on helping the wrongfully convicted reintegrate into society. Job training, startup funding, mentorship from successful exonerees. Turn my tragedy into something transformative. Create the support system I'd wished for during those first bewildering weeks of freedom. It was a good idea, maybe even a great one. But more importantly, it would cement my presence in the community, make me indispensable, transform me from the neighbor with a dark past to the philanthropist building a brighter future. By 3 a.m., I had a 50-page proposal. By dawn, I'd identified potential partners, board members, donors. Half of them were in David and Rachel's social circle. Tomorrow, I'd meet Rachel for coffee. I'd listen to whatever she needed to say, offer whatever closure she thought she needed. Then I'd mention the incubator, ask for her input as a healthcare professional who understood trauma, draw her in professionally, since personal connection was off limits. The plan was taking shape, more complex than simple revenge, more satisfying than mere proximity. I wasn't just going to live near them, I was going to become integral to their world. Every charity they supported, every event they attended, every professional achievement they celebrated would somehow intersect with mine. Rachel thought she'd escaped the weight of our past by divorcing me. But the past had a way of circling back, dressed in expensive suits and good intentions. She was about to learn that some ghosts didn't haunt. They thrived, they succeeded, they became impossible to ignore. I closed my laptop and prepared for bed in sheets that cost more than my monthly prison commissary allowance. Tomorrow would begin the next phase. Not revenge, exactly. Call it reclamation. Taking back not the years stolen, but the space in her mind I'd never really left. David could have her present, but I was going to own her past and shadow her future. Some prisons, after all, were made of guilt and regret rather than concrete and steel, and I was about to become the warden of hers. Before the planned coffee meeting could happen, fate intervened at Whole Foods. I was examining organic produce I didn't know how to cook when a cart crashed into mine. Sophie's wide eyes stared up at me, while James hung off the side of the cart like a monkey. Behind them, Rachel stood frozen, her face draining of color. "Sorry, mister," Sophie chirped, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding. James was being annoying. Was not. James protested. I smiled at them, keeping my voice gentle. No harm done. Accidents happen. Rachel found her voice. "Kids, why don't you go pick out cereal? 1 box each. And yes, James, you can get the chocolate kind just this once." They scampered off, and we stood there, two people separated by 20 years and 3 feet of gleaming linoleum. Marcus. My name came out like a prayer or a curse. "Hello, Rachel." She looked good. Tired, maybe. Stress lines that makeup couldn't quite hide, but still essentially the woman who'd stolen my heart at 22. Her wedding ring caught the fluorescent lights, a massive diamond that made the modest ring I'd bought her look like a child's toy. "I was going to call," she started. "You texted." I mean before, when you got out. I wanted to, God, this is so inadequate. I wanted to say I'm sorry. An elderly woman pushed between us, muttering about people blocking the avocados. The mundane intrusion broke something in me. Here we were, having the conversation I'd imagined 1,000 times, and it was happening next to organic fruit while her children picked breakfast cereal. 20 years, Rachel. You're sorry. She flinched. I know it's not enough. Nothing could be enough. But I need you to know I never stopped believing you were innocent. You just stopped waiting. Yes, the simple admission hit harder than excuses would have. I stopped waiting. I gave up. I chose safety over faith. And I've regretted it every day since. Funny way of showing regret, I said, gesturing vaguely at her ring, her life, her children chattering in the cereal aisle. What was I supposed to do, Marcus? Live in suspended animation? I was 34. I wanted children, a partner who could actually be there. You were never getting out. Everyone said so. Life without parole means something. Until it doesn't. Yes, she whispered, until it doesn't.
David appeared around the corner, carrying a basket of wine. His step faltered when he saw us, but he recovered quickly, the successful executive's smile sliding into place. "Marcus," he said, putting a proprietary hand on Rachel's back. Didn't expect to see you here. I eat, I said dryly. It's a new habit I picked up. Sophie and James returned, each clutching cereal boxes. Daddy, Sophie announced. We stayed in budget. David's smile became genuine as he looked at his children. Good job, sweetheart. I watched them, this family unit that existed because I'd been erased. The children were beautiful, innocent, completely unaware that their existence was built on the ruins of another life. I felt something shift in my chest, not forgiveness, but maybe the first crack in my armor of resentment. We should go, Rachel said quickly. The kids have practice. Of course. She started to push the cart away, then stopped. The invitation stands. Coffee, please. David's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. They walked away, a perfect family tableau that belonged in one of Whole Foods' marketing campaigns. I stood there among the avocados, holding organic produce I didn't want, watching the life I'd planned disappear again around the corner. My phone buzzed. Claire, reminding me about a charity board meeting. The Marcus Lawson who'd walked into prison would have abandoned everything to chase after Rachel, to demand answers, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but that man was gone. In his place stood someone who understood that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was demonstration, showing them day after day what they'd discarded. Success was the cruelest mirror, reflecting not what was but what could have been. I abandoned my cart and left the store. The Tesla drove itself home while I sat in silence, processing the encounter. Seeing her children had changed something. They were proof that life had moved forward, that the world hadn't stopped when mine did. I couldn't hate them for existing. I couldn't even hate Rachel for choosing to live, but I could make sure she never forgot what that choice cost. Both of us. The coffee meeting was definitely happening now, but first I had a charity board to impress, a reputation to build, a life to live so visibly and successfully that every achievement would echo in the space between what was and what should have been. Rachel had apologized in a grocery store, surrounded by organic produce and the beautiful children she'd had with another man. It was perfectly inadequate, perfectly real, perfectly painful, just like everything else about this new life I was building 3 houses down from my stolen future. The Lake Oswego Homeowners Association meeting was everything I'd expected. Beige people discussing beige problems in a beige community center. Lawn height regulations. Approved mailbox colors. The critical issue of whether solar panels violated the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. I sat in the back row for my first meeting, learning the dynamics. David served as treasurer because of course he did. Rachel wasn't there. Book club night, according to the social calendar I'd memorized. The president, a real estate agent named Brenda, who wore her authority like expensive perfume, ran the meeting with military precision. Any new business? Brenda asked, clearly expecting none. I raised my hand. I'd like to propose a community beautification project. Heads turned. The mysterious new neighbor finally speaking up. Mr. Lawson, Marcus Lawson. I recently moved to Lakeshore Drive. Recognition flickered across several faces. The wrongfully convicted millionaire. The one who'd made national news. The one who lived 3 houses from the Chens. What kind of project? Brenda asked carefully. I stood, commanding the room with presence learned in prison yards, where weakness meant victimization. A sculpture garden along the lake path. Local artists. Rotating exhibitions. I'm prepared to fund the initial installation and first year's maintenance. Roughly $200,000. The room buzzed. In Lake Oswego, money talked, but that much money sang opera. That's very generous, Brenda managed. We'd need to form a committee, review proposals. Of course, I'm happy to chair it if needed, or simply provide funding. Whatever serves the community best. David hadn't moved since I'd said my name. Now he raised his hand. I think it's a wonderful idea. Public art enhances property values and community cohesion. I moved to create an exploratory committee with Mr. Lawson as founding member. Our eyes met across the room. He was playing it smart. Keep your enemies closer and all that. I smiled. I appreciate the support, David. The motion passed unanimously. Within minutes I had volunteers for the committee, including Dr. Morrison's wife and the principal of Forest Hills Elementary. By meeting's end I was woven into the fabric of Lake Oswego's social structure. After the meeting, David approached. Can we talk? We stepped outside into the Oregon mist that passed for summer evening. What are you doing, Marcus? Participating in my community. You know what I mean. I let the silence stretch, a technique that had served me well in countless prison negotiations. David filled it, as civilians always did. Look, I get it. You lost 20 years. That's unimaginable. But Rachel and I, we have a family now. Kids who don't need to be collateral damage in whatever this is. What do you think this is, David? He struggled for words. Revenge? Punishment? Some kind of long game to win her back. You think very highly of yourself if you believe you're worth that much effort. I kept my tone conversational, almost friendly. I bought a house I could afford in a neighborhood I liked. I'm contributing to my community. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why. don't play games with me. I spent 20 years in a cage for a crime I didn't commit while you built a life with my fiancée. Who exactly is playing games here? His face flushed. She waited 8 years. I know exactly how long she waited. I counted every day. We stood there in the mist, two men separated by more than just stolen decades. Finally David sighed. The golf invitation stands. Saturday mornings, 7:30 tea time. I'll be there. He started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about what happened to you. Really, it's just you benefited from it. He couldn't deny it, so he didn't try. After he left, I stood in the parking lot, feeling the free air on my face, listening to the suburban sounds of sprinklers and distant lawnmowers. Prison had been simpler in some ways. There, enemies were obvious, alliances clear, motivations transparent. Here, everyone smiled while calculating angles. My phone buzzed. Rachel, thank you for being kind to the kids today. I stared at the text, then typed back. They seem like good children. You've done well with them. Can we still meet? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Yes. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her final message. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, whatever you're planning, remember they're innocent. I didn't respond. Let her worry about my plans, my intentions, my capabilities. The truth was, seeing her children had shifted something fundamental in my revenge calculus. They were proof that time had moved forward, that life had found a way despite injustice. I couldn't punish them for existing, but I could ensure their parents never forgot the cost of their existence. Every achievement I accumulated, every success I displayed, every contribution I made to their community would carry a shadow. This is what Marcus Lawson became despite you, not because of you. The sculpture garden was just the beginning. Within 6 months, I'd be essential to Lake Oswego's social ecosystem. The philanthropist, the survivor, the neighbor who overcame injustice with grace. And 3 houses down, Rachel and David would watch it all unfold, knowing that their carefully constructed life sat in the shadow of the one they'd helped destroy. Some prisons were made of guilt. I was about to become the architect of theirs. 6 months after moving to Lake Oswego, I threw the dinner party that would change everything. The sculpture garden had been a massive success. My tech incubator for ex-honorees had launched with features in Forbes and Wired. I'd become the redemption story everyone wanted at their events, on their boards, in their social circles. Even David had to admit, grudgingly, that I'd become an asset to the community. The invitation went out on expensive cardstock, hand-delivered by a courier service. Marcus Lawson requests a pleasure of your company for an evening of celebration and revelation. Deliberately cryptic, impossibly intriguing. Everyone who mattered in Lake Oswego received one, including the Chens. Rachel had tried to decline. I knew because Brenda from the HOA mentioned it at a charity luncheon. She seemed nervous about it, Brenda confided, but David insisted they attend. Said it would look strange if they didn't support their neighbor's celebration. Good old David, still playing the angles, still trying to control the narrative. He had no idea he was walking into a story 20 years in the making. The night arrived perfect, clear October sky, stars visible despite suburban light pollution. I'd hired Portland's best catering company, a string quartet, enough staff to make everything flow seamlessly. My house glowed with warm light, modern architecture softened by candles and careful staging. They arrived precisely at 8, Rachel in a silver dress that caught the light, David in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly prison earnings for a decade. The children were at a sleepover. I'd made sure to schedule the party accordingly. This wasn't about them. Marcus, Rachel said, offering a cheek kiss that felt like touching a ghost. Your home is beautiful, thank you. Though I can't take credit, interior designers are miracle workers. We played at normal through cocktails and appetizers. I worked the room, the perfect host, while always aware of where Rachel stood, how David watched me, the careful distance they maintained from each other. The months of coffee meetings between Rachel and me had taken their toll on the marriage. Nothing inappropriate, just 2 people circling old wounds while her husband wondered what remained unsaid. Finally, I called for attention. The quartet stopped playing, conversations died. 60 of Lake Oswego's finest turned to face me. Thank you all for coming, I began. 6 months ago, I moved to this beautiful community, looking for a fresh start after an ordeal I wouldn't wish on anyone. You've welcomed me with open arms, and for that, I'm grateful. Polite applause. Rachel's knuckles were white around her champagne flute. But I realized recently that many of you know only part of my story. The headlines, the settlement, the redemption narrative the media loves. Tonight, I want to share the full truth. I'd rehearsed this moment for months, maybe years. The words flowed like water finding its level. 21 years ago, I was engaged to a wonderful woman. We were young, in love, building a future together. Then I was arrested for a murder I didn't commit, convicted on circumstantial evidence, sentenced to life without parole. The room was silent. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. She waited 8 years, visited every week at first, then every month. then sporadically. Finally, she sent divorce papers. I signed them. What else could I do? She deserved a life, children, a partner who could hold her hand at more than a prison visiting table. I looked directly at Rachel then. Tears were streaming down her face. I don't blame her. I want to be absolutely clear about that. 8 years is a long time to wait for a maybe. She made the choice anyone would make. She moved on, built a beautiful life with a good man, raised wonderful children. The American dream, achieved. David's arm went around Rachel's waist. She didn't lean into him. But here's what I learned in prison. Time isn't linear when you're locked away. Every day contains multitudes, past, present, and futures that will never be. You live in all of them simultaneously. The life you had, the life you're enduring, the life you might have lived if only. I raised my glass. So tonight, I want to toast all the lives in this room. The ones you're living, the ones you've lost, the ones you chose, and the ones that chose you. To Rachel Morrison, excuse me, Chen, who taught me that love has limits. To David Chen, who was there when I couldn't be. To second chances and fresh starts and communities that welcome broken people trying to rebuild. The toast hung in the air like a challenge. Slowly, uncertainly, glasses raised. The quartet resumed playing. Conversations restarted in hushed tones. But the damage was done. Everyone now knew the connection between us. The story would spread through Lake Oswego like wildfire. The wrongfully convicted man living 3 houses from the woman who'd abandoned him, her husband who'd benefited from injustice. Every interaction we'd have going forward would be viewed through this lens. Rachel fled to the bathroom. David followed, then returned alone, his face grim. That was cruel, he said quietly. That was honest. Something you might try with your wife. What does that mean? Ask her about our coffee meetings. Ask her why she really wanted to move. Ask her whose name she whispered last Tuesday night. I hadn't been there Tuesday night, of course. But guilt has a way of making people fill in blanks. David's face confirmed Rachel had whispered something. Someone, in an unguarded moment. He left without another word, collecting Rachel, making excuses about a babysitter issue. Others began departing too. The party's energy fundamentally shifted. By 11, only the cleanup crew remained. I stood on my deck, looking out at the lake, at the lights of the Chen house 3 properties down. No victory in this revelation, just the hollow satisfaction of truth told too late to matter. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. That was unnecessary, but probably inevitable. I'm sorry for everything. Minor R. I deleted it without responding. We'd said everything that needed saying in coffee shops and grocery stores and awkward HOA meetings. The rest was just epilogue. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Living openly as the man whose fiancé had chosen certainty over faith. Building a life so remarkable that her choice would seem not wrong, but simply limited. A failure of imagination rather than love. The sculpture garden would grow. The incubator would thrive. I'd date eventually, publicly, successfully. And 3 houses down, Rachel would watch it all unfold, knowing she'd bet against a future that turned out to be worth $8 million and a second chance at everything. Some prisons were made of concrete, others were made of choices. Tonight, I'd transferred my sentence to the people who'd helped write it. Let them see how the walls felt from the inside. The aftermath of the dinner party rippled through Lake Oswego like a stone dropped in still water. Within a week, everyone knew the story. The wrongfully convicted man, the fiancé who'd given up, the neighbor who'd benefited. Our tragedy became dinner party gossip, HOA meeting subtext, the invisible elephant in every room we shared. David and Rachel's marriage didn't explode. It quietly crumbled. I watched from my deck as moving trucks arrived 6 weeks after the party. Not divorce, according to the Neighborhood Intelligence Network, but a trial separation. David kept the house. Rachel moved to a condo downtown with the children, close to her hospital. I felt nothing. The hollow victory I'd expected didn't materialize. Destroying their marriage hadn't been the goal, just collateral damage from proximity to truth. Prison teaches you that sometimes breaking things is just another kind of building. My incubator's first success story launched 3 months later. Jerome Williams, wrongfully convicted of robbery, served 12 years before DNA evidence freed him. We'd funded his coding bootcamp, connected him with mentors, helped him launch an app for formerly incarcerated people navigating re-entry. When TechCrunch featured him, they mentioned my program as revolutionary philanthropy born from personal tragedy. You did it, Jerome said at our celebration lunch. Made something good from something terrible. We both did. Nah man, you had millions, and could have just disappeared, bought an island or whatever. Instead, you stayed here, facing your demons, helping people like us. That takes a different kind of courage. Courage. Is that what this was? Or just an inability to let go dressed up as altruism? The answer came unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing applications for the incubator's second cohort when Claire knocked. You have a visitor. Says it's important. Rachel stood in my foyer, looking smaller than I remembered. The months since the party had aged her, or maybe just revealed the age that careful makeup had hidden. Can we talk? Really talk this time. I led her to the living room, the space designed to impress now feeling too large, too empty. I'm getting divorced, she said without preamble. David and I are done. Not because of you. I need you to know that. Because of us. We built our marriage on the foundation of your absence, and when you returned we realized there was nothing else holding us up. I'm sorry. Are you? I considered lying, then decided we'd had enough of that. No.
But I'm sorry for Sophie and James. They're adjusting. Kids are resilient. She twisted the wedding ring she still wore. I came to tell you something I should have said years ago. The real reason I stopped waiting. I waited. Prison had taught me the power of silence. I was pregnant, she said quietly, when you were arrested. 6 weeks. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel trapped. Then I lost it during the trial. The stress, the horror of watching them convict you. The doctor said it happens, but I knew better. I knew it was my body giving up, just like I eventually would. The words hit like physical blows. A child, our child, another life lost to injustice. After that, I couldn't come to the prison without feeling like I'd failed you twice. Failed to save you. Failed to save our baby. Every visit was a reminder. So I started coming less. Met David at a grief counseling group. He'd lost his first wife to cancer. We bonded over loss. Built something from shared sadness. It was never what you and I had, but it was something, and something felt better than the nothing you'd left behind. 20 years of anger cracked like ice in spring. Why didn't you tell me? Because you had enough to carry. Because I was a coward. Because telling you would make it real, and I couldn't survive it being real. We sat in silence, two people separated by decades and revelations. Finally, I asked, what do you want from me, Rachel? Forgiveness? Understanding? I don't know. Maybe just to finally tell the truth. The truth would have helped 20 years ago. I know. But 20 years ago I was drowning too. You at least had walls to rage against. I was in free fall with nothing to grab onto but the next bad decision. I thought about Jerome's words. Courage. Maybe it wasn't staying to face my demons. Maybe it was this sitting with the woman who'd broken my heart, and seeing her heart was broken too. I forgive you, I said, surprised to find I meant it. She sobbed then. 20 years of tears finally released. I didn't comfort her. We weren't those people anymore. But I witnessed her grief, and maybe that was enough. When she left, I felt something I hadn't experienced since walking out of prison. Free. Actually free, not from concrete and steel, but from the story I'd been telling myself about betrayal and abandonment. The truth was messier. A young woman dealing with loss who'd made imperfect choices, just like a young man who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. That night, I called a real estate agent. Not to sell the house. I'd grown to love the view, the community, the life I'd built, but to find a second property, somewhere else. Maybe Costa Rica. Maybe New Zealand. Somewhere I could go when Lake Oswego felt too small, too heavy with history. The incubator thrived. I dated a prosecutor who understood my baggage. David remarried 18 months later to Madison, his former trainer. Rachel focused on her children and her work, occasionally sending updates about Sophie's gymnastics or James's piano recitals. Cordial. Distant. Appropriate. 5 years after my release, I stood before another graduating cohort of ex-honorees turned entrepreneurs. 12 men and women who transformed their worst experiences into fuel for change. Freedom, I told them, isn't just about leaving prison. It's about leaving the prison of your own story. The narrative that says you're only a victim, only a survivor, only defined by what was done to you. Real freedom is choosing who you become next. I meant every word. Because somewhere between revenge and forgiveness, between past and future, I'd discovered the present. And in the present, I was just Marcus Lawson, not the wrongfully convicted man, not the abandoned fiancé, not the millionaire neighbor with an agenda, just a man who'd lost 20 years and chosen to make the rest count. That's the thing about time. It's not linear when you're free either. Every day contains multitudes. The difference is, outside the walls you get to choose which life you're living. I chose the one where second chances were real, where broken things could be rebuilt stronger, where freedom meant more than just walking out of a cage. And free houses down, or downtown in a condo, or somewhere in the geography of shared history. Rachel Chennai Morrison was choosing too. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Choose, moment by moment, who we're becoming. I chose freedom, real freedom, the kind that doesn't need walls to define it. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your life, remember this. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their choices. It's about choosing your own story. And that, after everything, is the ultimate revenge. Living so well that revenge becomes irrelevant. 20 years taught me patience. 5 years taught me purpose. But that Tuesday afternoon in my too large living room, Rachel taught me the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the person you need to forgive most is yourself. That's true freedom. Everything else is just geography. Everything else is just geography.